Securities offered through Kestra Investment Services, LLC. Kestra IS, member FINRA SIPC. Investment advisory services offered through Kestra Advisory Services, LLC. Kestra AS, an affiliate of Kestra IS. Capital Advisory Group, Inc. is not affiliated with Kestra IS or Kestra AS. Neither Kestra IS nor Kestra AS provide legal or tax advice and are not certified public accounting firms.
You work hard for your money. For the next hour, you're going to learn how to keep what's yours. Capital Advisory Group presents Keep What's Yours. Here are Josh Gilbert and Jeff Zufall.
Hello and welcome to Keep What's Yours with Jeff Zufall. I am Josh Gilbert, sitting here with Jeff Zufall. He is the Senior Tax Strategist and Wealth Advisor with Capital Advisory Group. Hello, Jeff.
Hello. Happy Saturday.
It is a great Saturday.
That
and
it is.
Talking taxes.
That's right. Yay.
We got some big news to get to. So I don't even know if we shoot out of the gate with this. I want to remind everybody, Jeff is my tax guy. Jeff is my wealth advisor. I go to Jeff. He allows me to keep more of my money, which means that when it comes out of our paycheck, some of it doesn't get taxed. And as long as we spend it on the proper things that are outlined in the tax code, we never have to pay taxes on it.
That's right.
If we didn't do that, at the end of the year, we would have owed or paid the federal government $2,400 that we didn't necessarily have to. So when it comes to, what do we get paid? Every 2 weeks? 52 weeks a year, 26 paychecks.
You get 20 bi-weeklies, 26 pays a year.
Sometimes those months have 3 paychecks.
Guess what? Month of August. If you're bi-weekly, month of August should have 3 pays in it.
Is there any benefit to that?
No, it just goes by the calendar.
Yeah.
That's it. So it's bi-weekly and you start rolling through. So there'll be, every year there'll be 2 months that there will be 3 payrolls in.
But it's not necessarily like, on that third one, we get, they don't take out taxes. Or,
No. It's the same. It's just you get 3 paychecks in 2 months. On a 26 pay cycle, there'll be 2 months that you get 3 pays.
So as it rolls through on, every 2 weeks, what's $2,400 divided by, 26 paychecks? I mean, it doesn't
$100,
yeah,
a little bit over $100 a pay.
Doesn't seem like a lot week in, week out. But when you look at it, you're like, well, that's $2,400. That's a vacation.
Yes.
That's, down payment on a new golf cart.
That's right.
Down payment on a new car,
Maybe.
Maybe. This is real money, and if we hadn't talked to Jeff and he hadn't set us up with our FSA, that's what we're using, then we would have just willfully given the IRS more money than
$2,400 and what you
legally had to.
Yep.
So it's great that every paycheck there's an extra $100 on there, and maybe if we sock it away, that's the thing. Extra $100, you never notice it.
Exactly. Out of sight, out of mind. Shows up in your paycheck. A year later, you go, wow, where'd that $100 go? Just human nature. Whereas if there was a forced savings program, 401k, whether it's Roth, pre-tax, makes no difference. That money would have been put away into. A year later, you'd have $2,400 and go, wow, cool.
And it's cool because, you take it out ahead of time, you bump up your savings percentage. I think I'm at 7% on both IRA and my Roth.
Yeah. And
what we always say is out of sight, out of mind. It's taken out of our paychecks before we even have a chance to see it. As long as we're still putting groceries on the table and
what counts.
We're paying bills at the end of the month.
Yep.
We are paying ourselves first.
Yes.
But if we get an extra $100 a month because we're using the tax code to our benefit, it's coming on our paychecks, and maybe if we don't do something smart with it,
exactly,
it'll just
go poof.
Yeah, it'll get spent with the rest of it. Oh, I got an extra, I still have
that's human nature.
$200 in my account before, I get paid tomorrow. I better burn through this money.
That's right.
As quick as I can.
Let's go to the store.
Yeah, let's go.
Or let's go online and buy something.
Yeah. Well, everybody in the truckster, we're buying. So you can keep more of what's yours, and hopefully you do the right thing and have Jeff set you up with something where you can keep the money and have it set aside or have it go towards something special, where at the end of the year you realize, boy, I do feel $2,400 richer.
Or you can see it.
Yeah.
The tax savings, and again, we've seen this. It's more of a kind of a psychology thing. Tax savings that you go, you save $3,000 and nobody sees it. If you could touch it or feel it, and it's in an account that you go, hey, there's my $2,400 I saved. That amplifies that. Hey, I did the right thing. It's kind of like a bias scenario. It's kind of funny.
And man, I mean, you mentioned it, psychology. When it comes to our taxes, when it comes to saving for retirement, when it comes to all of our finances, I was at a bank the other day, and my wife, she handles the finances, so she's talking to the loan officer, and I'm just kind of,
staring at the stuff,
staring around the office, and they had a little placard, and they said these are the current rates for CDs, and if you drop, 10 grand into a CD. Let them lock it up for a year. You get a 5% rate of return.
Yes.
And so I'm going through my head and I go, do we have 10 grand? Or more realistically, what can I sell to get 10 grand and lock it up? And then I'm like, but it's only, you lock up 10 grand for a year. It's only $500.
Yeah.
But
it's $500.
It's $500.
So you got to take that back 18 months ago. Interest rates were technically zero. I mean, you did not get paid. You were forced to be a stock investor, whether you wanted to be or not, because you could not get anything for cash. I mean, literally, it was a negative rate. So the Fed started raising rates. They've jacked it up to decent levels today. We have been under this concept of stay short until we know the direction that the Fed's going. So the theory would be is if they're raising rates, which is where we were, you kept ultra short, 6 months or less. That way, if you locked in a CD, you go 6 months, it matures. Hopefully, the Fed raises rates in that 6 months, and you could get a higher rate and go on from there.
Redo it.
Yeah, and reset the deck. Now we're in this position where our friend, Mr. Jerome Powell, kind of has laid the groundwork that maybe in September they're going to lower rates.
And we'll talk about that in the next segment. But
so again, if you're sitting in a CD, a money market, you could get 5% in a money market. And again, be careful when you go to the bank; they'll put you in a savings account. You don't really make that much in a savings account because the bank makes their money on you bring $10,000 in and you put it in a money market. They're going to pay you 3%. As you're walking out, somebody's walking in to borrow money for a car, and they go, hey, we're going to charge you 6%. That difference is the bank's profit, that 3% spread. So the bank is going to be reluctant to jack the rates up sky high because they're cutting into their profit in a sense. So if you go into a bank, say, give me the best performing money market you have out there, not a savings account, and they'll put you in a money market. Now, the money market comes with some caveats, and that could be dollar amount minimums that have to stay there to get that interest.
Have to keep $5 grand.
$5 grand, 10 grand, whatever the case may be, and our transactions where you only get to move money twice a month, or maybe it's 3 times a month. But each bank will have its own requirements to do that.
So you lock it up in a CD, you can't touch it for a year.
Yeah.
You put it in a money market, it's liquid. I can go in and get it out whenever I want, but there are rules to
Rules
that.
against it.
It's
Now,
not like I can use my debit card at the grocery store
and go
every
crazy,
week.
spend $7 grand, they'll kick you out and put you back into a savings account or
Right.
force it into a money market. A lot of the brokerage money markets don't have those requirements. So that's something to explore. If you have a brokerage account, you could get, we were running just shy of 5 just in cash. So it's cash, it's liquid, no risk.
So here's the scenario. I got 10 grand and I said, you want to lock it up for a year, I'll give you $500. I might scoff at that.
Yeah.
And this is the psychology of it.
Exactly.
Well, it's not that much money in the grand scheme of things. If I asked you right now today, do you have 10 grand? Yeah.
Mhm.
Where was it last year? Oh, it was in a savings account.
Yeah.
How much did you make off it? Nothing.
Nothing.
Did you touch it once or need it at all? Well, no.
Exactly.
You just gave away $500.
Exactly.
So
So that's part of what we try to get people to comprehend is there's also a number out there. And that number, everybody is different. And that is, what do you need as cash on hand? Means sitting in a checking account ready to go that you could write a check right now for.
we've talked about
Yeah.
this. When you go to bed at night,
Yeah.
especially when you're my wife who thinks about these things at night,
Punches
her up.
you at 2 a.m.
Yeah.
Hey, what about?
Can you go to sleep knowing that you have 10 grand
exactly
as accessible
accessible.
if
Yeah.
something were to go wrong.
Yeah, and the other thing is most people think that if they lock a CD up for 12 months, you can go in with an early withdrawal penalty and get access to it. Typically, a year CD, you're going to give up 6 months worth of interest on it, though. So again, depending upon where you're at, if you're in the first 6 months of it, you just don't earn any money. But hey, it's an emergency; you needed it. If you're 6 months or beyond, you're going to give up 6 months.
Yep.
So you may make a little bit on it, as you go forward.
And this is just the conversation of I've got extra cash.
Yeah.
And it's our rainy day fund.
Yeah.
Well, you don't just have to put it in a coffee can
Exactly.
and bury it out back with inflation being
Yeah.
what it is. You're actually losing
You're
money.
and the real kicker to this is throw inflation on top of that. So if you go, hey, I earned 5%, and this is what the whole reason that you invest in the markets is to beat inflation. And I say that time and time again, and people look at me like I'm nuts. The only reason you invest in the market is to beat inflation. And so the concept is when inflation's 2.5%, Fed wants us to be at 2 to 2.5%. So in the past, you couldn't get that in money markets. I mean, historically. So you would take a little bit, leave it in cash, invest to try to get maybe a 5, 6, 7% rate of return in the open markets. And that's the whole reason that you've invested. With, say, increase in share price and a dividend, you beat inflation.
Yeah.
So if inflation is running it, I mean, again, depends on whose factor you're watching. Feds say we're at 3.4. You question that when you go to the grocery store. But if you just look in general, everything is going up. So again, is it really 9, 10%? That's to be decided. And again, that's what you're investing for. That's the reason. And everybody's like, well, I made a 22% rate of return. Great. You beat inflation. Say thank you and move on to the next year.
Yeah.
And you go from there. So I think we've lost sight, big picture markets. That is really the only reason that you assume that risk is to beat inflation.
And things move so often, you do want to revisit this
All the time.
Every year, twice a year?
Minimum twice a year.
Minimum.
To see what your risk levels are. Because, again, we're sitting out there, an election's coming in, 2 months? A little bit over 2 months. Everybody, now the markets have recovered. Everybody's happy. They look at their statements like, I made all that money back. Oh, I'm good to go. There'll be another one. There'll be some weird scenario that takes place. Last time it was the Japanese decided that they were going to raise their interest rates. They threw that out there, and 2 hours later, we had one of the worst jobs reports that we've had in years. And the combination of those two, all the warning signals flashed. Everybody's like, oh, recession's coming, the world's over, and everything goes crazy for 4 days, and everybody came back to their senses. Again, the closer we get to this election, the more market volatility is going to be out there, where somebody says something else, the markets move by a couple thousand points. Again, don't buy into the knee-jerk reaction, but two, be prepared knowing, hey, what's my downdraft? How far could this account go at the end of the day? So if it really goes bad, the downdraft may be 20% in the hole. Could you handle that? Would it panic you? Most people like your age, my age, you still manage that. You don't like it, but you can manage it.
I'll weather the storm.
Exactly. Somebody that's 3 months from retirement.
That's a big
no.
deal. Yeah,
that's a
big
huge deal.
Yeah.
Now the market's hypothetically, can't say it always happens, pops right back. Typically, I think it's 18 months, 24 months, worst case. So again, not that the election causes the market, if so-and-so wins, the market's going to crash. We've been through how many elections in this country? We've been perfectly fine. Lots of turmoil, but we've been perfectly fine. Again, it's not the election that causes it. It's the fear of the unknown. Who's going to be running the ship? And people panic on that.
So if I put $1 in a coffee can and buried it out in the backyard in 2019, and if I don't spend money, then $1 is always going to be $1. But who doesn't spend money?
Exactly. But look at it this way, and nobody's going to send you a statement and go, "Hey, that $1 that you have in that can out back is now worth 95 cents."
Yeah.
And then a year later, it's worth 92 cents. And then a year later, it's worth 87 cents. And the problem is that's inflation. It's a hidden tax. Nobody, we don't ever get a statement to go, hey, your account's worth X.
Right.
But I make that analogy of You got a pair of jeans that you wore last winter. It's got $1 jammed in the pocket. You toss it in the closet. You put them on when this fall comes around. A year later, you pull out. You go, look, I found $1. Cool. That dollar literally is worth today. It's worth like 94 cents.
Yeah. So I go out to the coffee can, I dig it up, and I open the lid. And rather than a crisp dollar bill that's in there, it's a bunch of
94 cents.
change worth 94 cents. You put it into a money market or a CD or something, at least when you go out there, maybe it's
$1.05.
$1.05.
But if you throw inflation in there, you still are a little bit behind.
Now it's $1.02.
Exactly. Well, it's really 90-something cents. So,
Okay.
again, that's why I say you got to take inflation into consideration. The 2 to 2.5% average, I'll say, Fed expected inflation is okay. I guess really no inflation is ideal, but you're always going to have it. But again, that's the problem is people don't pay attention to that because it's not, nobody's ever sending you a statement to go, hey, guess what? Inflation is X this year. So take everything that you own and devalue it by 5 cents, 6 cents.
Yeah.
So
when you put money into your retirement account, it's working for you.
yes,
But what are you doing with your cash? And I just had to think about it sitting at the bank because, again, my wife's making the deals and I'm bored out of my mind. And I just start looking around and I'm like, let me ask Jeff about
Yeah.
cash.
Yeah.
So if you've got cash and you're keeping it for a rainy day and you don't touch it, or maybe you don't need as much for a rainy day.
Most people always are like, oh, I need to keep this $50,000 sitting just in case. And I get that. I'm 100% with them. But the question is what are your monthly expenses, number one? Number two, if you ever had a AC unit go bad on you.
I mean, that's 7,000.
A car
10,000.
breakdown, exactly. So
3,000.
do you,
You don't
need
need
access
50.
to 50? No.
Yeah.
So leave some in your money market or in your checking, but the bulk of it's left in your money market, getting a little bit better rate of return.
And
that's all you're trying to do.
You can call Jeff and you can say, what are the options? I'm a throw caution to the wind guy. Lock it up for as long as you want. My wife, not so much.
Yeah.
So we say, what are the options? What are the liquid options? What are the lockup options? What are our rates of return?
Exactly.
You don't want to just bury cash in your backyard because you'll open the tin can and find out you only got 92 cents left in there.
And that's if that really happened, people wouldn't do that. I mean, they would not leave cash sitting
And
around.
that's psychology.
Exactly. But nobody ever comes along and goes, hey, guess what? That dollar is not worth what it was last year. And that happens year in, year out. And that's why I say when they put the inflation factors or the CPI, Consumer Price Index numbers out there, that's just a percentage change from maybe a month ago or maybe a year ago. That's kind of like
from the last
that's a
3-4
speedometer.
years.
Yeah. But take the odometer side of it and run it back to 2018. What is it from 18 to today? And it's huge.
Yeah, you buried a $5 bill. Try and buy a cup of coffee with
Yeah,
you.
and you
No.
can't.
The $5 bill, you need two of them in there to buy a cup of coffee
Exactly.
these days. So that is Jeff. Give him a call, 636-394-5524, CapitalAdvisoryGrp.com. Jeff Zufall is the Senior Tax Strategist and Wealth Advisor with Capital Advisory Group, and we are going to talk just that. Inflation, is it down? The rates, where are they at? Big news coming from the Fed this week, and we'll touch on it right after this.
Keep What's Yours continues with Josh Gilbert and Jeff Zufall.
All right, back on the show. Keep What's Yours. Jeff Zufall, Senior Tax Strategist and Wealth Advisor with Capital Advisory Group. If you like what you hear, give him a call, 636-394-5524. Talking about cash last segment. And, hey, I got a lot of cash that's just sitting.
Mm-hmm.
What should I do with it to at least maybe make some money or at the very least battle inflation? Because, I mean, trying to battle inflation the last 3 years, it's like
been
fighting
tough.
that dragon.
It's come down. But again, it's almost like everything that you see has gone up in price.
Everything. Doritos,
Yes.
Pepsi,
Yes.
the coffee has doubled, which is crazy.
Yeah,
But-
and that's the funny because they took out of the Consumer Price Index, which is the basket of goods that we buy on a monthly basis. The Feds came along 2 months ago, I guess April, a little bit longer than that, and they took raw coffee beans out of that equation because it was the highest increase of a good. So it's pretty funny that you say that on coffee has skyrocketed because it was up like 78% year over year.
Well, I
Just
noticed
raw
it
beans.
at the counter
Yeah.
when they asked me to pay.
Yeah, and
I
you go,
went,
whoa.
But we talk about that Consumer Price Index, and where is it today?
So Consumer Price Index was up 0.2% last month. And so you go, hey, so the Fed is actually now leaning that inflation is tamed, if you want to call it that, from their view, not our view, most definitely. And so last week, our friend Mr. Jerome Powell started to kind of hint that they'll probably in September lower rates.
So essentially, the consumer price index, I go to buy something today, and it should only be 0.2% more expensive this year
Hypothetically.
than it
Well,
was last year.
That's the composite, and it goes month to month.
But
So
what's not included in that are the things we actually buy, groceries,
and
oil, and now coffee spike, and they're like, well, it's skewing the numbers, so let's
we'll
take
take
coffee
it out.
out.
Yeah. So, and it's a footnote. So every month when they release the CPI numbers, they'll have a footnote saying, hey, here's the technicality. And the funniest was nobody said a word other than the White House said, hey, inflation disappeared this month. Yeah. And it's like,
because we took coffee out.
And I don't think they read the footnote was the problem. So if you read the footnote and you see coffee's out, you go, oh, that's why. Yeah. So
well, I brew at home now.
Yeah.
So, but those pods at home probably are more expensive.
They are, yes.
So what is the news this week? The big news coming down, Jerome Powell at the Fed. We've been saying they won't cut rates. It's an election year. They're not going to cut rates. Chicago said if we're gambling on this in Vegas, we'll see one after the election, maybe.
So they meet September, and they meet the week after the election. So the Chicago Board of Exchange, I call us Vegas odds that they put out there, were kept pointing to the week after the election. It was like 86% chance. I haven't seen what it is this week, but now Powell kind of spoke, and he's leaning that it's time to start lowering rates. So what's that mean to everybody listening? It means your credit card rates maybe in the next 30 days. Well, if they do lower rates in September, 30 days after that, your credit card rates may come down just a touch. Mortgages, hypothetically, indirectly, should come down a touch. And it's part of the big picture, which is their problem in the past was inflation was raging away. You cannot lower rates when inflation is still raging.
Because the problem with inflation is that we're spending too much.
That's at the end of the day, you can't print money like we're doing today, and both administrations are guilty of it. Mm-hmm. You cannot continually do that and pump money into an economy and not expect some byproduct, and the byproduct is inflation, wicked inflation. So again, the Fed has a bunch of tools in their toolbox. They pretty much use them all, from bond buybacks and quantitative easing and all this weird stuff. Now it's interest rates. So you say, could they do it? And again, it took them 2 years to get the rates to start to step back down. Not to say the economy's different than what it was in the late 70s, early 80s, but it is. I mean, there's more technology in it. You would hope that they're the smartest people in the room. They have access to data that nobody else can get access to, and that it's not a misstep, because that's what the consensus was. The Fed waited too long to lower rates. Then we go into a recession, and they try and bring us out of it. So far, we're okay. Mm-hmm.
So if they lower the rate, if they do a rate cut in September, like they might be tipping their hand that they will, it doesn't mean that my mortgage rates go from 7 back down to 2.25.
If you're fixed, no, we'll probably never see that.
Yeah,
that's the problem. Is a lot of the pieces of property I know around here, Midwest, nobody's going to move for a long time. Mm-hmm. Nobody's giving up a 2.5 rate to go jumping into.
I got 2.75, and I
said,
honey, I hope you like it here
because we're stuck.
We're stuck.
Yeah, I mean, now if you're forced to by job changes or demographics or whatever the case may be. Yeah, and you have the money to do it. You could pull it off, but it's not happy. But again, going back, my age will show. My first mortgage was 9.5%. Mm-hmm. I didn't think anything of it, but I'd never seen a 2.4 or 2.2 interest rate out there. So no.
So a 7% interest rate on a mortgage, which that's kind of what we follow, because that really pertains.
To the normal mainstream America. Because remember, when the Fed lowers interest rates, that is the Fed funds rate. That is not
the mortgage
not prime.
Rate. The mortgage rate will lower in accordance to an extent.
At arm's length, because it is really tied to the bond markets. So by the Fed funds rate coming down will then force bond yields to come down, price to go up. And the bond yields are what the 10-year, 15-year is what actually runs our mortgage industry.
Mm-hmm.
And so you'll see indirectly where it'll pop back down.
So if it's 7%, these are funny numbers. If it's 7% now, they lower rates. Will it be 6.25%, 6.75%?
Probably
6.5%?
6.5-ish, 6.58, somewhere in that range.
So it's not it's not drastic.
No, it's not. But if you have,
And we don't want it to be.
oh no,
drastic.
because that any drastic stuff like that, even if they decrease, if they came along and did a half a point decrease in September, it would panic the market because then they're like, oh, the only time they ever do half point decreases is when the economy is faltering big time.
Mhm.
And they'll do a half point jump like after 2008. They did, I don't know, 2 half point. The first 2 cuts out of the box were half point decreases to spark the economy and get it going. Because remember, you decrease interest rates to spark activity in the open economy. You increase interest rates to slow activity down. So what they want is, again, our economy is built on consumption, unfortunately. To find the savings rates and the M1 and M2, which are banking, kind of where people are putting money, you got to dig deep to find them. Before they used to be out there front and center. Our economy is built on consumption, period. How much can you spend?
So they want us to stop spending so much.
When they raise rates, they are choking off spending. And when they lower rates, they're opening the doors to go, hey, go buy those houses and boats and cars.
And we've brought this up before. I call it the Yogi Berra economy. Everyone's, this economy stinks.
Yeah.
Because people are spending too much.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, we're buying stuff as fast as we can. Sounds like a great economy. No, it's actually driving inflation up so much that it raised the interest rates.
Yeah.
But what does this mean to small business loans?
So SBA notes, hopefully because most of the SBA notes out there are variable. There's people with huge SBA amounts that have taken the risk to go buy property, to go buy, big ticket items, buy businesses, whatever the case may be. SBA has helped them. When they started these guys, it was 2.4, 2.8 was the interest rate.
So I took a loan for 2.8%.
Exactly, but it's variable. So
and then they raised interest rates.
And the interest rates went through the roof. And literally they're sitting at 11% today, and it's killing people. They can't make the payments anymore.
But that's untenable.
And these are not, $50,000 notes. They're 7-digit plus. And so hopefully the Fed sees that from the Small Business Administration going, hey, we have a problem out here, and that is the interest rates have skyrocketed so far so fast. A lot of people can't make these payments. And that's where we are today.
And just to illustrate it, I know we're using funny numbers here, and we probably shouldn't, but if I had a small business loan at 3% for $1,000 payback a month, and they jump it up to 11%, I mean,
you're at $2,500, $2,700.
Oh my God!
So now take that on $1 million or a $4 million or a $8 million SBA note, and it's huge.
Oh my gosh!
I mean, huge.
I mean,
and to go
I would have to default.
Well, that's the problem. Is SBA kind of smiles and says, "Hey, guess what? You don't realize it, but you pledged your house for this note,
oh boy,
personally. So you might want to make those payments."
So a rate cut would give some relief.
Give a little bit of relief. A few rate cuts would help dramatically. And it's very possible that we could go into 25 with, a couple more rate cuts coming on the backside. They really haven't. Fed doesn't play their hand to that stuff. But the reverse could take place too, because remember, in the late 70s, early 80s, interest rates they ran in inflation. They raised rates into the 7 or 8%, kind of where we are today. And then a guy named Paul Volcker was running the Fed back then under Reagan, and he went, hey, all clear, let's cut rates. They started to decrease rates. A year, maybe 14 months later, they went, oops, we missed the mark. They skyrocketed, and that's how we got into 14% interest rates because to combat inflation on the backside of that took just as much as rate hikes to slow it down.
So we will see what happens in September, but the biggest news that came out this week was that they are Well, we'd love to see the numbers from Chicago.
Yeah,
what is
they
Chicago?
haven't.
What's their percentage?
It had to flip going the other way, but I
Yeah.
haven't seen them this week. I didn't pay attention to it.
They
this
were
week.
certain it was going to be in November.
Oh,
And
they
now
were.
they're,
Yeah.
uh-oh.
Now they're like, maybe not.
Yeah. So
So-
whether it's a good thing, whether
Yeah.
it's a bad thing, whether
Again,
we think that we need a rate cut or we don't. you
yeah.
know?
Again, the backside, they did say they are still data dependent, and conditions could increase or decrease. I guess he phrased it a little bit different than that. But again, data dependent with, hey, stuff can change weekly and we'll adjust as needed.
Yeah.
So,
Well, we'll see what happens, and we'll keep you posted here. This is the show that follows the rate cuts and lets you know how it will affect you. And Jeff, I definitely seen when the rates went skyrocket that, the interest I'm paying on my credit card bill
everything went up.
So
Everything.
It's
So,
not
yeah.
just small business loans. It's not just mortgage payments. If you got a credit card with a balance on it, you're paying more in
Yeah,
interest
you're going to pay more.
for sure.
Well, unless it's already hit its max, and
Yeah,
then you're
I've
25.99
been-
or whatever it is.
I've been at 28% for years, Jeff. All right, let's take a break, and when we come back, talk about a couple more things. Underpayment penalties are huge, but if the IRS owes you money,
It's the same way.
it's the same way. So you pay 8% for underpayment, but if they owe you money, they'll pay you 8% when they pay you back. It is Keep What's Yours with Jeff Zufall, Capital Advisory Group. We'll explain all that in just a second, but 636-394-5524. That's the number to call Jeff. If you need help with your finances, if you need help with your taxes, who here pays taxes? Me.
Yeah.
Everybody pays taxes. So if you're not doing anything to lower that tax bill, Jeff can help you out with that. 636-394-5524. CapitalAdvisoryGrp.com.
Keep What's Yours continues with Josh Gilbert and Jeff Zufall.
All right, back on the show and talking a lot of stuff today, rate cuts and what to do with your cash if you have it out there. And just consult Jeff on all of that, 636-394-5524. And if I realize that the rates have jumped up so much, Jeff, that I'm finding I can't pay my bills and I'm getting behind every month, I can just come in and say, Jeff, here's everything.
Yeah.
And throw down all my paperwork. And you can say, well, let's start sifting through this and see what's going
Yeah.
on.
And if it's like credit card debt, typically we could refer you to somebody. We don't do that, but we could refer you to some people that will actually go out there and help negotiate maybe interest rates, get it down a little bit to help you get them paid off, stuff like that.
Right.
But typically a budget is that, and I say that word and everybody's like, budget. The budget is a starting point.
Yeah.
I get a lot of people come in and say, I'm going to retire next year. And I go, great. What do you need for income? And they go, huh?
Right. So, but a HELOC rate, depending on where you go, let's just call it 10, 11%.
Mhm.
That's a lot lower than 28% of my credit
Sure it
card.
is. Yeah.
So
The
maybe
problem.
pay off the credit cards.
Exactly. And the only bad, and I say this, I've seen it multiple times, is you take and you shift the money from the credit cards to the HELOC. Now
And then you don't pay that off.
Exactly. And then you rack up the credit cards. And then a
Again.
year later, you're like, I'm
Yeah.
right in the same boat, but now it's twice as bad because I got a HELOC against my mortgage. And then I also got a credit card.
Well,
So
let's
you
do
gotta be
this,
careful.
that, and this. But number one bullet point, budget.
Yes. Budget is the kicker.
That's the number
And-
one.
And if there's issues where you have holes in your budget, then we got to figure out how do you patch them.
Yeah. An audit is a bad word, but not necessarily when it's talking about Jeff and I sitting down.
Exactly.
You're going to
Yeah.
audit my situation
Yeah.
and figure out what's going on. And
Yeah.
you can audit people's small businesses. That's what you
Yes.
specialize in.
Yeah.
Is if I got a small business and I'm hemorrhaging money or my SBA loan went through the roof and Jeff,
Yeah.
what do I do? You can sit down and just say, well, what's going out? What's coming in?
Yeah.
And what can we make some changes to? So give Jeff a chance to look at your small business as well. 636-394-5524. Now, we talk about underpayment penalty all the time, and people tried to beat the IRS on this back in the day when it
Yes.
was 2-3%. Well, I can go out in a money market and get 5%.
Exactly.
So if I just keep this money rather than pay my tax bill, at the end of the year, I made 5% on it, and I'm only paying the government 3% in penalty.
You're
I
ahead of the
just
game.
created 2%
Exactly.
in my pocket. However,
They've adjusted that. And they adjusted it in November of 23. They came along and raised that rate to 8%. It is an 8% underpayment penalty, which is the interest on the dollars that you owe. And then they'll throw penalties on top of that. And so again, the funniest was we just had a gentleman the other day, $257. He got the notice. People goes back to that psychology, got the notice, panicked because he saw the first number and was like, whoa, I owe that money. Is there a mistake? The problem is most people will, when you get those notices, you look at the bigger number on there and you think you owe that. His was $15.07, and it was on $257, not, tens of thousands.
Right.
Yeah, so that's where they panic, and then their brain freezes, and they don't read the rest of the statement. And I get it. I'm accustomed to seeing them all the time, so it doesn't faze me. But the problem is they're charging interest on dollars that are owed. If you owe basically $1,000 or more to the IRS or to the feds, they then will come along and say, hey, we're going to ding you for an underpayment penalty. And if you're self-employed, then you get the failure to make proper estimated payments. And then they show through this interest at you, which is 8%. So again, it is very, very, very expensive. Used to be where we play the game and say, hey, go invest it in the market. You'll be okay. We'll pay it at tax time. You have to make either estimated payments going forward and are up your withholding as you go forward on a payroll.
So if I owe the IRS $1,000 and I don't pay them,
yes,
and they charge me 8% a day,
it's technically compounded daily, but it's over a calendar quarter, or they do it monthly. So you'll see, if you ever see a notice from the IRS or the state, it'll have the month of August, and it'll have X dollars you owed us. Here's your interest, and then July, and so on and so forth.
So if I owe $1,000 and I don't pay them first day, they charge me 8%. That's $80.
Mm-hmm.
The next day, do they charge me?
No,
$80?
Technically it's compounded daily, but it comes down to be some weird factor that they throw out there. But literally, it would be 8% a month going forward.
8% a month.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's real money.
It's
if I'm
real
not
money.
Paying them.
Seriously.
And look, this show is called Keep What's Yours. We're designed to stop you from overpaying the IRS.
Exactly.
And if you owe them money, you're paying them more.
More
you
money.
Already owed them
Yes.
the taxes.
And
now
even
you're paying them more taxes.
And even some people say, well, hey, I filed an extension. That means that I got until, September or October to pay. No, you do not. The tax is actually due April 15th. So if you owe money, that's why we may call some people, we get close to the deadline for extensions, and we're like, write a check for $2,000 to send it to the state of Missouri just to make sure you don't owe them any
Kind of like
money.
this. Jeff calls you and say, hey, we filed an extension. Great, I'll see you in October. No.
Yeah.
No. Hang on. Don't hang up. You still owe the
yes.
government. Pay
You
them
have to pay them.
now.
Yes.
Because they're going to start running the
tab.
juice.
The tab starts rolling, and that's when they get you. And then that's when they come along for failure to not pay proper estimated payments, for underpayment penalties, for in some cases you got to be careful. Under reporting of incomes, I think it's a 25% penalty. Where if you go, oops, I found this 1099. So again, you go, most people wouldn't do it. But what if you just started a business? And you said, hey, I got $10,000 of revenue, and then you find a 1099 later that has another $10,000 of revenue.
Oops.
And you go, oops, that's under-reporting of your income. They'll ding you for a 25% penalty.
I'm an individual, married, filing jointly. I worry about this once a year.
Mhm.
If I was self-employed or
You
an
worry
Uber
about it
driver,
monthly.
monthly, quarterly.
Yeah, definitely quarterly. We set a ton of people up on estimated payments all the time. Some people pay them, some don't.
And that's the beautiful thing is this is what I would say, because I'm lazy and I hate to do paperwork. That's the beautiful thing about working for a company. They
take care of it for you.
They take care
Yeah.
of it for me.
Yeah.
If I was self-employed, driving an Uber,
Yep.
doing whatever, and every month or every quarter I'd have to redo my taxes,
Compliance reporting is crazy.
I'd be like, you know what? I'm just going to get a job.
Yeah.
Because I'm sick of dealing with the taxes, but
Yeah.
you stay on top of it. You get Jeff to stay on top of
Exactly.
it with you. You pay them when they're due. You don't
Exactly.
get these dings. You don't get, and you could still be self-employed
Yep.
and loving life and not
Yep.
having a boss.
Exactly.
So that's kind of how it works with the underpayment penalty. Do not ignore this
No,
because
it's
8% is huge.
Huge. And a lot of people didn't. They just saw the tail of it last year. You're going to see the full effects of it because it came at this 8% was skyrocketed in October of 23. So really only fourth quarter of 23 applied. So then you did your 23 tax return. You go, oh, that's not that bad. Now you'll have the full year of 24 at a full 8% all year long or every calendar quarter. It's going to be a huge amount. So just be prepared.
Now, on the flip side, if they owe you money, they'll
You
give
get the
you
same. Yeah,
8%
goes back and forth both ways.
return
It's a
on
two-way
that,
street.
you
As long as
know?
you're not a corporation. That gets
Sure.
into a whole nother ball.
Well, I'm not.
Yeah, but
So-
just your average person, normal person, if they owe you, they're going to pay you the money plus interest, but that interest they pay you is taxable income. So it goes on the Schedule B, interest income, says U.S. Treasury, paid me $200. Not what they're paying you back, but the interest on that money they owe you.
Well, let's illustrate that because you were telling me tax returns. If you filed a tax return for someone who had passed away
Yes.
within the last couple of years, you might not have seen that yet.
You probably haven't seen it. So the IRS has fessed up and finally said, hey, we have an issue. And this is from the National Taxpayer Advocate. And so this is on a deceased taxpayer. So if you had an aunt, uncle, parents, family member that passed away, you were the responsible party, maybe the
You still got to pay their taxes.
They still have to file a tax return. And in some cases, they owe tax. You got to pay it. And in some cases, they get a refund back. And you go, man. So there's what's called Form 1310. It gets filled out and put in that tax return as you are, whoever is doing it is the responsible party. And they're going to send you the check if there's a refund check. We have people that for 2019, you filed your taxes in 2020. Apparently this division they just shut the door and nobody was filing anything. And the IRS is finally, because of the number of complaints that have been kicked up by people looking for cash from, estates, deceased individuals. Now the IRS is like, oops, sorry, we've been lagging on that dramatically. So they've started to release this back out. So if you're sitting out there waiting and you've gone nowhere with the IRS, here shortly you should start getting some coming back.
And if you did this in 2019,
They owe you
2020,
interest all the way forward because they were sitting on your money. Now, here's the
So,
bad part is
yeah.
it's probably an estate. The estate might have been closed. So this check's going to show up. It's going to be in your name as the trustee. But the interest is really hypothetically due to that deceased individual's estate. Do you really want to fire up a whole nother tax return and report it, or just do you report it personally?
Well, it depends on how
So-
much money it is.
There's
so-
some big bucks sitting out there. I mean,
Yeah.
So,
So if you get a check in, say the government, for Uncle Earl
Yeah.
filed his taxes posthumously, you were the responsible party,
mhm.
and Uncle Earl had a $1,000 tax return.
Yeah.
You get 8% interest since 2019.
Teen coming forward. It's a huge check. I mean, you
Mhm.
say thank you very much, but yeah, your cash that was owed to either you or the estate or whoever, and typically those are broken up, beneficiaries and so on and so forth.
Sure.
So yeah,
But then I get the money, and then the IRS comes back, and this is what I don't get. They come back and say, "Well, you owe taxes on that." It's like, well, if I owe taxes, take them out before you give it to me.
technically in
It's
those
not how we do it.
situations, that's not how they do it. No.
We don't do it like that. We give you the money, and then we ask for it back.
Far it back, or at least a small portion of it
Yeah.
back. Yeah,
Yeah, but you're still coming out ahead.
yeah. You are.
Um,
I mean, it's money that's owed, and again, it's a joke that it's been sitting out there since 2019. The return was filed. FAR 2019 filed in 20. COVID hit. I think the fraud was a little rampant, and they just tossed everything and shut it down. So,
yeah, close the door.
yeah. So if you're waiting for a deceased descendants refund, it should be on its way.
All right. Well, that's good news for those people. So if you owe the IRS 8% penalty, that's huge. If they owe you money, this is why I say the IRS, we don't like them, but they're fair.
Yeah. I mean, at the end of the day, they are.
If they owe you money, they'll pay you back with 8% interest as well. It is Keep What's Yours with Jeff Zufall. Got one more segment coming up, 636-394-5524. That's the number to call Jeff. Capital Advisory Group, CapitalAdvisoryGrp.com. We'll be back to close it out right after this.
Keep What's Yours continues with Josh Gilbert and Jeff Zufall.
All right, back on the show. Last segment here. Just really quickly before we close it out for the week, I want to talk about our beautiful, proud Olympians
That's right.
who either came home with gold, silver, bronze, or a
Nothing.
great experience, and at least a story to tell their grandkids. If you are an Olympian and you earn a gold medal, does the IRS count that as
Technically,
something?
if you make more than $1 million, it's taxable income to you. If you make less than $1 million, you don't pay tax on it. So I think our example would be Michael Phillips. back in the 2020 Olympics. He had already had sponsorships and all kinds of crazy stuff, and his gold medals he paid tax on.
So even if he made not making $1 million at the Olympics, but
No,
making
just
$1 million
in general.
in private life, selling Wheaties boxes,
Whatever.
and doing
Yep.
Energizer commercials.
So you would over $1 million, you're going to pay tax on it. Under $1 million, Obama actually did an act of Congress and said, "Hey, you do not pay tax; it's exempt income. You don't pay tax."
And I would
on
like
the
to
gold.
think most of our Olympians, outside of Michael Phelps, Katie Ledecky,
Yep.
and the entire men's basketball team,
Yes, they make $1 million a second. So
they probably are, working athletes.
Yeah.
These are people that might even have day jobs.
exactly.
Um,
So they typically don't pay tax on it. And so the kicker on it is, if you get a gold medal, it's $37,000. That basically there's cash prizes, or $37,500 for gold.
And this is just what the United States pays out.
Yeah,
So I
and
saw,
other
like,
countries
yeah.
have some weird.
Hong
I mean,
Kong
they
was paying
pay-
$700,000.
Yep, they
for
pay
a gold medal.
some big bucks for it. $22,500 for silver, $15,000 for bronze. And this year, first time ever for track and field only. It's the first sport that actually is going to introduce prize money. So if the winning athlete gets $50,000 on an individual gold medalist, and then $50,000 is given to the team to be, if you got the for the
Four-person relay.
four-person relay and stuff like that. So literally, you get $50,000, and you get win a gold, so you get $37,500. You get $50,000 from the Olympic Committee, and then your team gets the split 50.
Right. So unless you win 20 gold medals in one Olympics,
You never
you're
hit
not
that threshold.
hitting that
Yeah.
$1 million
Yeah.
threshold.
But other countries do. I mean, they pay some big bucks for anybody bringing back a gold.
yeah.
so-
And I think the other countries that pay the big bucks are countries that don't necessarily bring home gold medals.
No, yeah, that's like a one in a lifetime. So yeah, you're going to get $1 million if you win gold. So
Yeah. So train hard,
Yeah.
kids, and one day you can start paying tax
that's
on
right.
that gold medal, just like the rest of us.
That's right.
So interesting fact, and now I think the Paralympics
Yeah.
are
Well,
about to start.
And this runs under the same concept. So it's the Olympics and the Paralympics fall into this category.
So we kind of got a 2-week break, and now
Yeah,
Paris
and then they
gearing
fire back up.
again
Yep.
to do the Paralympics.
Yeah.
So let's root on those athletes as well. And again, if you win a gold medal, call Jeff Zufall
That's right.
immediately.
One, I want to see it.
Yeah. Honey, I won a gold medal, but I got to let you go. I got to call my tax guy.
Yeah.
636-394-5524. Capital Advisory Group, CapitalAdvisoryGrp.com. Jeff Zufall is the senior tax strategist and wealth advisor with Capital Advisory Group, and he's the host of Keep What's Yours. Jeff, thank you so much for helping us keep more of our money
That's right.
in our pockets, on our paychecks, and in our money market accounts, and less going out to the federal government.
Thank you.
You've been listening to Keep What's Yours with Josh Gilbert and Jeff Zufall, Senior Tax Strategist and Wealth Manager at Capital Advisory Group. To learn more, call 636-394-5524 or visit CapitalAdvisoryGrp.com.